Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Danielle Gould. I'm the founder of Food Tech Connect. Thank you. And we're really excited to be here. It's pretty amazing. I mean, we're at the White House, so who wouldn't be excited? But it's also really exciting to have food on the same stage as all the other innovation topics that we're talking about today. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm the founder of Food Tech Connect, and we are the site of record and world's largest community for food tech and innovation. We bring together investors, entrepreneurs, executives, professionals to work together to create a better food system. And we live in an incredible time of change, right? At every point of every industry, technology and new business models are really changing the game. And the same is true for food. So right now, we're at the beginning of the biggest revolution to the food industry since the Green Revolution. It's the good food revolution, the information revolution. And what we're seeing right now is that people are adopting new business models, new technologies, and to create a future of food that's better for people, profit, and planet. It's more transparent, it's more equitable, and it's better for the environment. And so there are a couple of examples that I wanted to share just to illustrate how seismic this change is that's happening. So, for example, a couple of years ago, one of the only places that you would go to get local organic food was Whole Foods or a farmer's market. Today, Target, Myers, Costco, all of them are offering local, organic food. Additionally, the top 25 food companies lost $18 billion in market share over the last 5 years. And that's because all of us eaters are standing up and saying, no, I want something different. I want food that's better for people, planet, and profit. And so this transformation that's happening right now is being driven by entrepreneurs, by farmers, who are also entrepreneurs, investors. And so today we're going to have a chat with some of the innovators that are driving this change. So I'd like to introduce our panel, and then we'll get started. First, we have Will Allen. Will is the founder and CEO of Growing Power, and he is a powerhouse. Growing Power is a nonprofit center for urban agriculture training and building community food security systems. It's involved in more than 70 projects and has outreach programs in Milwaukee and across the U.S. Will is also a MacArthur Fellow. It's very exciting to be here with a lot of my food heroes. So next we have Nikiko Masumoto, who is a farmer on the Masumoto family farm in the Central Valley of California. She spent her childhood slurping over ripe peaches on her family's 80-acre organic farm, and she's never missed a summer harvest. Now she works full-time on the farm, and she returned to farm with degrees in gender and women's studies and performance as public practice. Next, we have Caleb Harper. Caleb is the principal investigator and director of the Open Agriculture Initiative at MIT Media Lab. Under his guidance, a diverse group of engineers, architects, urbanists, economists, and plant scientists is developing an open source agricultural hardware, software, and data commons to create a more agile, transparent, and collaborative food system. And last but not least, we have Maria Rose Belding, who is a food insecurity researcher and currently serves as the co-founder and director of Means Database, a nonprofit communications platform for food pantries and their donors. So I'm gonna kick off the conversation. So for each of you, because everyone has a different definition of what a better food future looks like, could you tell us what, in a couple of sentences, what a better food future looks like to you, and then what are you doing to build that future? Let's start. Yeah, you want to start?
I get to go first?
Yeah.
All right. A better food future for me looks like one that is equitable and fair and shares opportunity. We work with emergency food provider partners in 47 states and counting. It's a lot of different markets. It's a lot of different places and regions and ideas. a good food future is sustainable and it is accessible to everyone.
What does sustainable mean to you?
What does sustainable mean to me?
Yeah.
Sustainable means we can keep doing it. It works. We don't have to change it. We don't have to undo damage in 100 years or 200 years.
Caleb, what about you?
All right, so in 3 words, trust, transparency, and more farmers. So the average age of a farmer is 58 in the US. Only 2% of us do it. I want to make 1 billion more so that there's electrical engineering farmers, mechanical engineering farmers, coding farmers, and then take all of that we learn and make it open so it can't be owned. We need to start thinking about the data around agriculture because it's happening right now and put it in a democratic place so people have access to it for 10, 20, 50 years from now. Ag was open source until like the 70s and 80s when they started protecting the intellectual property. So the future of ag to me is we can trust something because we have access to all the information and people are smart enough to do something with it.
And so what are you doing to build that future?
Oh man, if you guys after this go check out our food computers, it's an open source hacker kit for teaching kids about coding, mechanical engineering, but also plants and food and nutrition. So we're just raising that next generation, that 4th generation farmer, the 4th growing revolution. So you can go check it out, and it's happening right now.
Great.
I can't wait, Caleb.
Thank you. I get excited, sorry.
Yeah, this is why we're here. So when I think about a good food future, I definitely hope that future includes organic, amazing, delicious peaches. Because I can't imagine my life without peaches. And thinking on a larger level, when I hear the word sustainability, I translate that into life-giving. Sometimes sustainability can be kind of like a wonky word, right? So in my practice as a farmer, as a young farmer, as an artist, I try to ground myself in those 2 words, life-giving. Because I think that's where agriculture started from. It was this place of trying to support community, of trying to support healthy living, and making sure that what we're doing as farmers is not endangering our future, but in fact is healing the soil and also healing the relationships that we have created between people. Our history of land and ownership of farms in this country is a landscape, a cultural landscape, right? So when we're talking about the future of farms, we not only need to heal the environment, but we also need to heal some of the wounds that we've created amongst ourselves, whether that's across racial lines, gender lines, and this is all part of what I hope the life-giving force is of our future food.
And what are you doing to create that future?
I'm every day waking up and working on our small organic farm, which takes a lot of physical labor, takes a lot of sweat, takes a lot of patience. We're a family farm, so that means working every day with your dad is both rich and challenging. And then so through our farm, we're trying to elevate the stories that really ground us. We're storytellers, so not only are we worried about the health and the vehicle of our story, which is our peaches, nectarines, and grapes for raisins, but we're also worried about the vehicles that we use to connect. So I can talk more later, but I definitely want to talk about our Adopt a Tree program we have, which we host. About 250 people come out to our farm every summer and harvest their own tree. And what's amazing about that is it's this total authentic experience of connecting people back to their food source, which I think is part of the transparency that Kayla was talking about.
And Will has been urban farming, which just became hip, but for over 20 years. So can you tell us a little bit about what you think?
Well, you got that number wrong. It's over 50 years. But
Over
24 years we've been doing urban agriculture.
Right.
For me, the future of food is about creating a system that's going to heal our communities in terms of being able to be a part of ending poverty, in terms of being able to have urban agriculture, small-scale farming as an industry. We need to make this an industry. All of these box stores want our food, but we don't have enough farmers. We have an aging group of farmers that are growing good food that we all want. We also have to realize that 90% of our soil is depleted of the minerals and the microorganisms if we're doing sustainable agriculture that we need to keep us healthy. So we have to restore our soil, we have to grow soil, we have to be able to farm closer to where folks live. It's just not a sustainable thing to ship food from miles away. We cannot end poverty by shipping food. We cannot heal ourselves by shipping food from a long way. So our local food systems have to be developed. And that's one of the things that we've been doing for over 24 years at Growing Power in Milwaukee and Chicago and outreach centers around the U.S. is to really grow farmers, because we just don't have enough farmers to give you all what you want in terms of local food. But you guys are demanding it, and that's why wholesalers are asking us for that food. So we have to scale it up, and everybody has to be involved in the movement, because we're all responsible for our food and for our fellow man. We need to make sure that in these communities that I work in every day, these communities where we're having all these problems, where no jobs are available, if we're able to change the food system into a system that creates thousands of jobs, then we'll be able to, because there are over 100 jobs in the food system and in farming. We just have to be able to get enough funding. So this next farm bill, we got to do this next farm bill right. We need to have money for farmer development, for building infrastructure, for being able to build these vertical farms, vertical walls, to be able to grow inside, because climate change has affected how we grow food as farmers. It's very difficult to grow outside today. So we're going to have to grow in greenhouses and hoop houses and develop that infrastructure that's going to cost millions of dollars. But I can tell you, if we are able to take some of these young people, and I call them young from 16 to 45, 50 years old, to have jobs, to create jobs for them. Because when they go downtown in Milwaukee where development is happening and they fill out an application and they check that box, and they've had a felony, they won't get hired. So if we're able to train those young people to go into the food industry that we need, then we'll be able to change the dynamics of all of these communities, and we won't wake up every morning and turn on the TV and see there's been multiple murders in Chicago and Milwaukee and all the other cities around our nation.
One of the biggest challenges is there aren't enough farmers to feed us in the way that we want to be feeded. So, Caleb, I know you're also working to train the next generation of farmers. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach?
Yeah, we call it the Nerd Farm Army. So, all of the young kids that I'm teaching in the lab or working with in our open source networks, what do they want to do? They want to do technology. They want to do sensors. They want to do data. But they also care about food, but they know nothing about it. So they need some place to ground their knowledge. So if you think back to like the 1970s, those crazy computers that you saw in like garages, that's what's happening right now for the generation. They're exploring food again. They don't know exactly how it's grown, but they do know how to collect data, and they do know how to share that data with each other on a network. And so we're trying to putting those two things together. Give them tools to feed their interest that develops a really powerful person. So at no other point in time has it ever been possible to hit the network this hard, right? We're the networked economy. So agriculture is still very industrial. It's super big farms. It's 1 or 2% of the population. So when we talk about population changing, 50 billion people, whatever, to 9 billion people by 2050, to your point, what are the 9 billion, or the additional 2 billion? What are they doing? Are they farming? Could we have 1 billion farmers? Would that make sense? We have more than that on Twitter. So could we not have that many people using that kind of technology to better the world instead of just send selfies?
Yes.
I don't know. So that's what I spend a ton of time thinking about. They want to be involved. They need tools to be involved. There's not a lot of knowledge to go around. When all of these great farmers with beautiful organic farms and the mind that it took 60 years to cultivate, when they're not there anymore, who's there to pick it up? And we have awesome people, and we need to make more of them.
Yeah, Nikiko and Will, how do you feel about that? All the technology coming into farming. I know that there are a lot of farmers that are, feel very averse to technology because technology for so long has represented GMOs, seed technology, companies that are very proprietary, very expensive. So I'd love to hear about what you think about that and how you're integrating technology.
Yeah,
into your work.
I think it's important. We use a lot of technology in terms of aquaponic systems to grow fish because anytime you eat a fish that's grown in outside, there's contaminants in it, there's mercury contamination, and we have to be able to grow our fish indoors where you don't get that mercury contamination, that you can eat this fish every day, regardless of whether you're expectant mother or whoever. But today there's warnings. When you go to Lake Michigan and you catch a fish, you can only eat a certain amount of that fish. But I want to talk a little bit about inspiration because we really need to inspire these young people. We need to be able to quantify that you can make a living farming. You can make a living in these industries that are attached to farming. And one of the most inspirational things happened right on this property. When First Lady Michelle Obama and Sam Cass put this garden on this property, there's an estimated 10 million people started farming, started growing in their backyards and side yards.
Sam's right there if everybody wants to look at him awkwardly.
Yeah. And that's what we need. So we don't have enough young farmers. It's just great sitting next to this young lady because she's the next generation. But we need to create those farmers in our inner cities, like I said before. But we need some strong examples to take our people in power to be able to see it is possible to grow food in the city. It is possible to build vertical farms. It is possible to raise fish inside because China right now delivers the most fish to our nation than any other place. We've pretty much lost our catfish industry in the South. We've lost, when you think about tilapia that you eat, it's coming from China, and catfish is coming from China. Many of the other fishes, we're the largest consumer of fish in the world, but we're one of the smallest producers of that product. So those are the things that we have to do. It's not going to happen overnight. Because when you go to a grocery store today, what I want to see happen, and we talked about this in the green room, wouldn't it be wonderful if you had a section when you walk in the grocery store, the produce aisle is always to the right, and you walk along there and there's a placard that says locally grown. And there's also a wanding system. As you pick up a head of cabbage or lettuce or any product, and you can wand it and it'll tell you what the nutritional value of that food is. That's where we need to go. But we also need the old school ways of growing food because we need to compost. We need to change the dynamics of our soil. In Wisconsin, last year we did 40 million pounds of food waste into compost. We do not grow in the existing soil because there are too many contaminants in the existing soil. So we have to take the waste that's going into the landfills and grow soil like we used to do. What we're talking about is turning the clock back to how our food systems used to be. In Iowa, we have a young lady from Iowa here. In Iowa, back in the 50s, 85% of the food that was eaten in Iowa was produced in Iowa. Now it's less than 15%. So we need to go back to those days where we did have a local food system. We did have a healthy food system. And that's what we really have to put some dollars. And the only way this is going to change, we're going to have to take some money out of commodity payments to go to large industries, people that don't even farm, and put it into farmer training. And the other piece in our cities, it's much cheaper to give a person a job than to incarcerate them. 10 times less expensive. So we need to put money into the training of these young people in our inner cities.
So this is where I get super excited, because there are these through lines that are getting connected, right? Okay, so we're talking about our food future. We're not only talking about environmental healing, restoring soil, building local economies, but we're also talking about innovation, and we're talking about, I think what we're all articulating is a cultural shift that has to happen. If we want those 1 billion new farmers, which I desperately believe we can do, we have to, this is where I get excited as an artist, because this is where I think art enters the picture. We have to change the narrative of who even imagined themselves as a farmer. I was not supposed to be a farmer by so many conventional norms, because I'm a woman, because I'm queer, because I'm mixed race, right? We people that look like me, that are like me, don't farm. And those cultural narratives, I think, are imperative, that this is where we need partners in arts, in activism, in policy, to change those scripts, because that's the only way that we're going to build up.
So when we talk about cultural narratives, one of the pervasive narratives is that good food is a privilege, and that you, in order to get access to good food, you have a big salary. And so I'd love to hear from you, Maria, kind of what you're doing to change that narrative and giving everyone access to good food.
All right. So it's really important to kind of delineate that access to good food can happen in low-income communities. It does happen in some low-income communities, but it's not a given. Good food is not available to everybody at a price that everybody can afford. So it's so important when we have conversations about the future of food, is really, really recognizing that, and recognizing that even if we advance the good food of people living above the poverty line, that's great and that's awesome, but we've got to do the same thing for people below it. We really, really have to make sure that we make this accessible for everybody. So what we do, we are a food recovery nonprofit. We work with grocery stores and restaurants and caterers, anybody who serves food. We move their excess into communities in need. So we help pull milk that was going to be thrown away, and we follow all local, state, and national food safety laws and rules and health codes, and we get it into places that need it for free. The whole idea here is that you should not have to pay to do the right thing, whether you're a retailer or a food pantry.
I think too, on that point, like, it's funny, it's kind of crazy. You go to the high-end store and you buy the expensive stuff, and they're being all tested now. And it's not necessarily any better for you than the thing sitting next to it that's priced less. A lot of it has just become marketing. So to your point about the wand, like, we've got to be able to verify the information. You want to say this is from this farm in this place and this happy cow was next to it when it was grown, like, I want to see that data. I want to see, because I don't trust you. So the consumer has frankly gone from more cheap food. So that's why green revolution, that's why synthetic fertilizer, that's why big farms, to better, more nutritious, more sustainable food. And all the grocery stores, everybody's recalibrating. How can we get them more information? How can we create trust again? And so it's a big, wide open space for things like spectrometers to come in and say, look, we're gonna scan it. You can't lie to me anymore. I wanna know why I'm paying $1 more for that than $1 for this. And if we get that level of knowledge, which we don't have, then we can target nutrition. And we're like, oh, in the food pantry, we shouldn't just be sending the 14-month-old apple. We should be sending the 2-month-old apple that has antioxidants in it. And this would actually make them healthier, and the other one's just sugar and cellulose fiber to make people less healthy, but they're both apples. So that kind of transparency is coming with spectrometers, with analytical chemistry. And so that's why I think data on the side of organic farming, data on the side of, welfare for people to eat better in cities, like, that's where the power comes.
I'd actually love to bounce off what you just said with nutrition and not only getting more information and being able to scan it or look at it and say, yes, this really is from this place. It's also so important that we focus on consumer education, especially among young people like myself. I graduated from public high school in 2014. I had a great high school, about as privileged as it gets in terms of a public high school. And our nutrition education was zilch. It was almost entirely lacking. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, but that's a very common experience for young people my age. That's very common. For us to have been told, you've got to take all AP and all honors, you don't have time to take home ec. You don't have time to take nutrition classes. You have to take the really hard classes so you can get into a good college. I think so much of the consumer education has been us Googling things, which is important, for sure. But there's so much lacking in terms of really teaching young people and older consumers about nutrition and understanding what you're eating and what you're putting into your body.
I want to get back to something I touched on earlier, but one of the biggest problems we have in this country is that there's racism in our food system. You have to ask yourself questions about why aren't there any grocery stores in inner city areas in America. There used to be grocery stores in inner city areas of America, but today it's hard to find. There's one retail grocery store in the city of Detroit. In Milwaukee, we hardly have any box grocery stores in any of these at-risk communities in Milwaukee. So we really have to work on dismantling racism in the food system. It's something that we work on through our Growing Food Injustice work that we do every day for the last 24 years. Because that's where it's at. It's about being able to make sure that everybody has access to the same food. That we don't have different foods in different communities. The other thing that we have to realize as you drive through these cities, sometimes there's a 20-year difference in life expectancy as you drive through based on the fact that people don't have access to clean water, good food. The environments are very bad, toxins everywhere in some of these communities. So when you make that loop, you go just a few miles to an upscale community where people live 20 years longer than the people of these at-risk communities. We should all be appalled at that. We should all be working on, because everybody in these inner city communities, when we have problems, it affects all of us. It's just not, you can't run away from it. You just can't. You can try to move to the suburbs and get away from it, but you got to be able to come back to the city for social things, for the arts and so forth. So we have to fix this thing. It can't be fixed on the backs of farmers. You know, because everybody thinks farmers can fix this. We can't. So it's got to be a partnership with everybody. And like I said, one of the strongest pieces that has to happen is this next farm bill, where we need to have the right representation at the table to make sure this happens.
And there's a huge need. So last year there was $10 billion that were invested in food and agricultural technology startups. Very few of those companies are working on access. So this is a call to anyone that's looking for a new project or has a technology or has any kind of company in working in this space. It's really important to get into food and into improving accessibility. There's a great example of a company that I just learned about called Everytable. They do dynamic pricing based on the community that they're in. So if you're in Santa Monica, you may spend $10 for a meal. If you're Compton, you may spend $4 for a meal. Same food, same access. So these kinds of things, I just want to put a shout out there, a call for that there really needs to be a focus on accessibility, not just getting middle, to high income people food faster. Caleb, I'd like to go back to the idea of open source, because I think that at the core, and when we think about the infrastructure of what it's going to take to create this new food system and what's going to fuel the this revolution. So healthy soils, right? We've talked about accessibility. We've talked about ending racism, equity, investing in farmer training and consumer education. Open source is something that most people don't talk about it, but it's so important, and that's at the core of so many of our issues. Could you tell us a little bit why it's important?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's super important to the future issues. So if you don't know open source, think of it this way. There's Linux, which is a free operating system. There's Apple and there's Microsoft. And you're like, I've never heard of Linux, if you're a normal person. But Linux runs 94% of the commercial servers, which means it runs the internet for the world. And that's because it's open source, everybody knows how it works, and then they develop things on top of it, like different operating systems. That took millions of people, that took a lot of money, that was supported by all the big tech companies to get the internet ready to go, to get it going and networked. This is the next step for us. So we're getting all this data now. It's either gonna be owned or it's going to be for everyone. And so if you open source it and you say, hey, this has to say open sourced, it becomes virally licensed. And so this was invented in the 70s to keep code open source. Now this might all sound too techie for you, but if you want to know more about stuff, you have no good information at your fingertips. You're kind of being handled by everyone you talk to. They're like, oh no, this is the better way to do it. Oh no, that's the better way to do it. But if you want to cut to the bone, creating this place, this commons, where we can go to and say, okay, you know, how good is this really? Has it been sequenced? Is it good with my genome? Do I have, like, now that you can sequence human genomes for like $1,000, do you know that like 3 years ago, what was $1 million? We're gonna be pairing what's good for each one of us individually with the things that we eat. We're gonna get a lot smarter about that. But either that's gonna get owned by very few people, just like the internet could have without companies like Mozilla, without companies like Linux, without freedom of internet advocacy, or that information about the expression of life, the nutrition that we need and where it comes from can be open to educate that next generation of farmers that's gonna be doing data science, that's gonna be doing artificial intelligence, machine learning, things that are so foreign to ag, right? You sit here and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds scary. But let's embrace it. You know, the narrative of climate change is always bad news. So like when you tell a kid in a classroom, the climate's changing, he's like, hey, she looks up, no, it's not. And so, but if you can put a climate in their classroom and you can show them what that means, you can create that curiosity to make a change, and it requires that kind of openness.
So if I could just jump in, I just find this fascinating because, Caleb, it sounds like what you're talking about is trying to develop a democratic forum for language about food, right? Language and information. And that sentiment echoes so much of the conversations that we have around our kitchen table about trying to make the stories of our food visible, whether they're the stories of the people who actually work the land, farm workers and farmers, and trying to make the movement not just unidirectional of farm to fork, but fork to farm. Because if we only have a single direction of our information, of our knowledge, of our passion, then we can't collectively create that open future together.
When I would say, like, in that exact frame of reference, think of open genome. Everybody knows that now. It fundamentally affected science, and every one of you sitting here. Open genome took people sharing information, 10,000 people, millions of dollars. What's Facebook doing? Open sourcing their AI, TorchNet. What is Apple doing? Open sourcing their app developer. Why? Because it's about the network, and it's about how many people can you get investigating and adding to one solution. And food is the most complex one, as has been evidenced by all of the problems that we've all talked about today.
So what can we do as eaters to compel companies to open source their work or their research?
I hate to monopolize everything.
Well, no, I'm going to go ask everyone. Yeah.
I'll go. I think, well, first of all, if the code's written in general public license, and if you're not a software person, that's okay, it means that you can't possibly proprietize it. So if the base code is written that way, good luck. Like, it has to be open. The other thing is, you're already doing it. It's not like, I mean, okay, I'm a little bit kind of in the middle because I'm a scientist. So I'm like, I don't really think anybody's base evil. Maybe they are. But the grocery stores now, they want to give you what you want, right? You're now asking for information. They're trying to figure out how to give it to you. They want to be open because they want you to buy their stuff. If you're asking for openness and you're saying, I want more healthy food, they're going to offer it to you because they'd like you to buy it. So, I mean, I think it's really that. And you see, really funny examples like McDonald's recently makes like an open source how they made the chicken McNugget. Like the most mysterious food item of all time. And now they're telling you how they make it and what chicken it came with. Like it's already happening in crazy levels. So just keep pushing for more knowledge, more access, more transparency, and I think it'll work.
And that's what's so cool about what's happening now is that all of us are driving and compelling companies like McDonald's to start being open and transparent. What about you, Maria? What are a couple of things that people can do to help improve access to good food?
Okay, so some things you can do to help improve access to good, healthy food. Number one, listen to the community. One of the biggest mistakes I think that gets made in working in low-income communities is people from outside those communities showing up and being like, hi, I'm here to help, we're gonna do this. That's not really how this works. Going in and asking, what do you want access to? What fits your culture? Half of what we move at Means is actually from other food pantries and soup kitchens because it just gets left on their doorsteps and it's not culturally appropriate. It's things like whole apples for homeless populations, and many people struggling with homelessness really have bad teeth and it's really hard to chew, so they can't make use of that donation. So I think the number one thing you can do if you've got a place you want to help is go in and ask. Ask what you can do, what can I do, how can I be helpful? And number two, just listen. It's hard as a human being to listen to other people, especially when we think we know what's best. It can be very easy in the food space to create a hero and a villain. It can be very easy to follow a narrative of this is the big bad guy, this is the, David and Goliath, what have you. Think with nuance. And that's really hard, and I certainly struggle with it, but I think that's some of the best advice I can give. Listen to the community and think as open-mindedly as you possibly can.
Great.
This is such a great question to send off, like what can we do? I think that there's so many different ways of plugging into our food futures. And one of the things that I ask is we have a tendency to think about sustainability as a checklist of things that we can check off. And I'd like to replace that checklist with commitment over a lifetime, because that's how long it takes a farmer to understand her soil. That's how long it takes a community to rebuild. It's a commitment for an entire generation. So generally, I would love for people to translate some type of commitment to nourishing, to the life-giving force of food, whether it's at your next meeting and catering the food from your next meeting from a farmer that you know, from a locally sourced food business, or if it's something larger like getting involved in crafting of policy and who's at the table. And so as long as you all commit to doing that, I will commit to waking up every day and picking up my grandfather's shovel and being a next generation on the land.
Okay, I want to build on what Maria said, because she said something that was really profound, in that we have people that come in to communities and say, we want to help you all, to raise you up, to help you in poverty in your community. And I think it's very important to understand that there's so much knowledge in our communities. In our native communities where people have been farming and growing stuff and seed saving for generations, that we think that we can come in and teach them a different way, or we can steal their wild rice and Universities try to do this up in Minnesota and different states where they come in and they want to replicate something that is natural. We need to get away from that. We need to make sure that we get invited into communities. Our organization doesn't go into anybody's community unless we get invited into the community. And I think that's very important for us to start operating that way. Universities have been notorious for coming into low-income communities, getting their research, and leaving their community with nothing. I think communities are a lot smarter. When they come with money today, a lot of times they get rejected because they come in the wrong way. They don't get invited in. They want to come in and tell communities what to do. So we need to really value our communities and understand that our communities can do a lot of this stuff on their own. They may do it in a different cultural way, but they can do it.
I think that is open source to another generation. That's just a different word. Like, to be able to have the ability to use the things that come out of universities, maybe that's a policy issue. And you say, if we're going to fund your research, it's going to be devoted to the common.
Yes.
It was before it all got started to be owned. So if you were going to fund it as the United States, let's make it be open and let's make it be useful to the next generation of farmers. It's that simple.
I think it also speaks to the vast cultural landscape of food to eater connection, right? We have cultural landscapes of ethnicity, race, gender, and place, urban to rural. And I think we have to remember the rural culture as a viable culture too, in building our food system of the future.
Just to pick up for a second, one of the things I was so excited about, when I go into a new place, like I went to Detroit and I was invited to go over there, I was like, oh gosh, I don't even know what to say. I'm here with this funky box that grows food, I swear. And I was really scared about what was going to happen. But since everything was really open, they had all these other ideas, way better ideas than I ever had about how to use it. They were like, oh, we have this kind of niche thing that we could do with this, and all of us could make money. And it was really interesting, too. They mostly talked about jobs. They were like, it's not only about the food that's made in urban farming and made in kind of peri-urban farms, but it's also what they're doing. And so you're like, hey, here's new technology, or in this case, 15,000-year-old technology that you can have access to become an entrepreneur, a small one. And they get stoked. And they have all the best ideas because they've lived there for 100 years or 50 years or 20 years or 10 years. So I think it's all about platforms. Like, can you give them a tool and then be like, paint your own picture? Like, use your cultural knowledge, use like the knowledge of your local networks to do something meaningful, but they really need some tools to do it.
All right. Well, I guess the only quick thing that I would add to that is that keep voting with your dollars because it's working. And thank you all so much for having us and for sticking around.